Hi, and welcome to True History of the Silver Screen. My name is Matt, and I'll be your host tonight. All right, for our second episode here on True Histories of the Silver Screen, we're going to talk about the movie Life. And no, it's not about the board game. All right, so in this film, it has two kind of big names in it with Robert Pattinson and Dane Dehaan. Pattinson plays the photographer that follows Mr. Dehaan around, who is James Dean. I never really, I've heard the name James Dean before. You could say it, I'd be like, oh yeah, some guy from history. But this one really broke down the history of his life, and I was able to understand so much more about what people saw and who he was. Of how Dennis Stock met James Dean at a party hosted by Nick Ray. In the movie, Nick Ray's party, Dennis Stock kind of naturally came across James Dean and they were introduced that way. In real life, though, Nick Ray brought Dennis Stock over to James Dean and introduced the two. Two kind of have casual conversation going on. James Dean invites Dennis Stock to come check out a screening of one of his films. Kind of downplays the role, just kind of like, yeah, hey, I'm in the film, you should come check it out. Dennis Stock's like, all right. What he was led to believe was kind of like maybe a small part for James Dean actually was like, whoa, this dude is the key figure. He is like the lead actor. So a whole new respect from Dennis Stock for James Dean on the talent that he had in the film and how nonchalant he was about it. As Hollywood normally does it, they do cut out some of the story. They cut right away to Stock meeting with Dean at the diner the very next morning where the two go over their conversation. However, in real life, Stock does see Dean right after the screening of the movie and yells at him, hey Dean, you are an amazing actor. Much like in the movie, in real life, the conversation at the diner did bring up the original ideal for the photo shoot that James Dean and Stock did for Life magazine.
Research purposes, James Dean's probably one of the more interesting historical figures to try to dig up the facts on, because even people that were close to James Dean really, there's a lot, he's an enigma. Every James Dean book, even a James Dean book that's printed as a second edition of a previous first edition, will be different than the last. It's really fascinating just to see how many different takes there are on the same story.
So as Keegan was discussing, James Dean has so many different stories out there about him. It's really hard to defer which ones are accurate. But one of the ones that was in a lot of the stories, and it was pretty even, was the one with him and Pier Angeli. So, James Dean and Pier Angeli's relationship is not only brought up in, the magazines, the books, the documentaries, but it's also, mentioned in the James Franco version of James Dean and some of the earlier 80 films on James Dean. All right, so the story does ring true, though, how the two met. They met at a Warner Brothers studio. James Dean was working on his film, East of Eden, and Pier Angeli was working on her film, Silver Chalice. So Pier Angeli's mother was not a big fan of James Dean. She didn't like the fact that he was not Catholic, and she could care less for the way he dressed. So that's why, later on in some of the big premieres, you saw James Dean really dress up. Not only did he want to show how much he cared for Pier Angeli, but he also wanted to show her mother, hey, I am a good guy and I will take care of your daughter. And he also wanted to show Jack Warner as well, I can be a strong person. All right, so we get now to the point where, James Dean does go back to New York. Pier Angeli does drop him off at the airport. Leads us to the sudden breakup of James Dean and Pier Angeli. Rumor has it that, Pierre's mother and Jack Warner played a huge role in this. Jack Warner was said to have threatened the career of Pier Angeli's. So now this brings us to a wedding, a marriage. Pier Angeli ends up marrying Vic Damone. So James Dean unfortunately found out about the marriage of Miss Pier Angeli and Vic Damone through, kind of tabloids. It was nothing that was, public to him prior to it. It was just, it was so sporadic that, hey, boom, now these two are married. But, it still is really hard to say, how much that James Dean and Pier Angeli had, affections for each other. They loved each other. It's been said that, they found a letter after Pier Angeli passed away that, the love of her life died behind the wheel of a Porsche, which, represents James Dean, as that's how he died. With James Dean on his side, in pictures that you can find that are real pictures of his place, there are pictures of Miss Angeli up on the wall still, and there might even be a marriage certificate with her name on it. Movie, it does show that Pier Angeli and James Dean do go to the premiere of A Star Is Born together. That's nothing that is false, as there are actual pictures of the two attending this premiere together. And what was kind of cool is their outfits matched. As we go back to Dennis Stock, it's really hard to bring up, factual information, but from what we've told or what we know to be out there is that, it's been said that his son learned a lot more about his dad from the film than he actually knew about his dad in real life. And at the time when the film came out, Dennis Stock's wife was like, hey, that was nothing like him. But, she really couldn't say for sure either, though, because she did not know him when he was at that age. Most of the movie does take place at the farmhouse in which James Dean grew up. So James Dean moved into this farmhouse at the age of 9. He moved in with his aunt and uncle shortly after his mother had passed away. Also in the house was his cousin Marcus, and Marcus is still there. We do see a lot of photography. Dennis Stock is taking a ton of pictures. These are all authentic pictures. We do see them in Life magazine. We do see them in other publications of books and so on. But one of the most famous pictures of James Dean was the one that was taken in Times Square, right in New York City. And speaking of Life magazine, this right here is the actual copy of Life magazine with the actual photo of James Dean in Times Square. If you want to hear more on the review of this magazine, click on the link right here above me. Alright, so kind of like we said at the beginning of this, James Dean was always something, I've heard of him, didn't really understand him. This movie really kind of helped shed light, at least for me, on who he was, the character he was. I enjoyed it. James Dean is truly a unique individual that, wish he was around longer, honestly. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would recommend this. Definitely like a 9.5 out of 10. Very well done. Some kind of fun facts for you here. We've always heard that James Dean wanted to play the role of Billy the Kid. He wanted to bring it to the big screen. So it's kind of funny that Mr. Dane Dehaan played the role of James Dean. He also played the role of Billy the Kid. So why don't you guys kind of let us know, what role did he play better? James Dean, Billy the Kid? Let's have a little Dane Dehaan showdown. So thank you so much again for joining us today. I hope you learned some about James Dean, as you know I did. If you'd like to find out more about true histories of the silver screen, check out this link right here. And as always, if you want to check out more about us here at Culz Paranormal, click on the link right here. Let us know in the comments below, what is your favorite James Dean biopic? And don't forget to give us a like and subscribe.
And switch that notification bell from personalized to all if you want to be notified on all of our videos.